Hi, I'm Wim Coleman,
And I'm Pat Perrin. We've been writing books together for more than 20 years, and we're still married.
and today we would like to talk about a book that we wrote called Anna's World, which has received several different awards. Uh, it's a young adult novel set during the 1840s, mostly among the Shakers, and it's the adventures of a young girl who has to make a choice between the life of the Shakers and the world outside. In some ways, this book is really quite untypical of the sort of thing we write. We tend to work out on the fringes, either writing fantasy or writing science fiction or writing books that have a realistic basis but in really startling ways. This is really a pretty straightforward, realistic book. I think one of the most interesting observations that either of us made while we were working on it was that Pat compared it to a science fiction novel, and I'd like to ask you why you think that.
Well, in a lot of science fiction novels, people from Earth have to adjust to and come to understand a foreign or an alien community. And of course, the novels comment on our own community and ideas at their best. And I, I think that Anna has to do that. She is plopped into a community that's completely different from anywhere that she's ever lived. And she has to figure it out, and she has to compare it and make some sense out of it. The other thing is that I don't believe that a historical period, an earlier period, is just like ours, except without electricity. I think that the reality that people experience shapes them. And as authors, we have to get into that. We have to figure out what has shaped these characters, find out how they react to them, and find out how it comments on our own world.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And the thing that happens in Anna, which is quite interesting, is she is left to live among the Shakers by her father, who has gone bankrupt in a flood, and he wants to leave her there for a couple of years. So this being plunged into different worlds that you're talking about actually happens twice to her. She finds the Shakers very strange and extremely alien, but then when she's brought back to life in Boston with all its expectations of proper behavior and how a girl should behave, it's like a science fiction story all over again for her, and she has to come to terms with where she really belongs. Now, of course, when you are writing for young people, it's extremely important to keep a component of humor and adventure and excitement involved, and Anna's World is to a large extent an adventure story. She gets herself into a lot of trouble with the Shakers. She helps a friend escape. Her life is threatened by a corrupt Shaker, and you know, a lot of very exciting events ensue during the course of the novel.
Well, once we had this character, it was Anna, who is a rebellious character, she was naturally going to get in trouble
Yeah.
with the Shaker rules. She had a very hard time with that. She also was drawn to kind of lively and intelligent friends there, rather than ones who easily conformed to the Shaker community. And so she ended up helping someone who wanted to escape uh, and following up with her throughout life. They remained friends, and the girl who wanted to get away from the community, there were consequences to that. We follow her life to some degree too. And the reason that Anna gets in trouble with the Shaker who is corrupt is that she won't let things be. If she suspects something's wrong, she's going to investigate it. She might well get caught, and she might well be endangered
She's
because
plucky
of that. Yeah,
and rebellious.
yeah. So that's all there.
And you know, that kind of thing I think it also helps explain its appeal to teenagers and of course to adults. We never get tired of that kind of character.
We wrote this as a book for teenagers. We found that it appealed to a lot of adults as well as teenagers. So that's something to think about.
I do know of a teenager whose uncle was very frustrated that she wasn't reading, and he gave her a copy of Harry Potter. The obvious thing to do. She just couldn't get interested in it, put it down, and he happened to have a copy of Anna's World handy, and he just threw it at her. She couldn't put it down, and I think the reason for that is this taps into a sort of an adolescent experience where you are in a world that is ruled by adults, but you are trying to find your own conscience in your own way at the same time. Another reader compared Anna to Huck Finn, which I found very, very flattering. And I think there are some similarities. These are two children who find themselves carrying the moral weight of an entire nation on their backs, and they're too young to be doing this, but they're doing their best. In Anna's case, when her father takes her to Boston, she finds out that he's a munitions manufacturer and that he's largely responsible for arming troops in the Mexican War. She hears a lecture by Thoreau in which Thoreau connects all the dots from the Mexican War to slavery to the clothes we wear, and shows that in the world it is very, very hard to escape the evils that we're perpetrating. We can say that we're against slavery, but we're tainted. People at that time were tainted by it, whether they knew it or not. And so she as a very young girl, is faced with this choice. Does she stay with her family, or does she go to a place where they simply won't take part?
Well, I think one of the very realistic things about it is Anna has no perfect choices.
No.
She lives in an actual world in which you find the way you can do the best you can do. And I think that that, again, relates to any genre. This is not just a historical novel. This is a story of a person who has to deal with how to live in the world, and don't we all?
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's one quote that comes to mind a lot, particularly now that we're writing young adult and tween novels more and more. Madeleine L'Engle once said, "You have to write the book that has to be written, and if it's too hard for adults to understand, then you write it for children." And I think that says a lot, and I think it also says a lot about the literary culture today, which seems to be based on the assumption that humans and human nature are fixed and unchanging.
Yeah.
You're born into a dysfunctional family, you're stuck. You will grow up to be like your parents. One of the most startling statements I can remember ever reading was in the New York Review of Books shortly after Stanley Kubrick died. The novelist Diane Johnson wrote a little memoir of working with Kubrick on The Shining. Well, she admitted pretty much up front that she had not had any contact with Kubrick since she'd written The Shining, which had been quite a few years. But she added, "But after all, do people really change?" And I thought that was such a shocking statement to come from a storyteller. I mean, isn't our craft to show the capacity of human beings for transformation and change?
Well, one of the things that we work toward in all of our books is to investigate the possibilities. What might people become? And whether they get there or not, of course, is another thing. That's part of the story. But the possibilities, the possibilities give us a reason for not giving up, for not just settling into whatever it was that we were planted in.
Yeah.
Not only do I not believe that people in earlier points in time were necessarily just like us, I don't think that people in various cultures are necessarily all alike. And there are certain things that we can say, like, they care about their children, but that means a different thing in different cultures, what they will do about caring about their children. We've lived in a different country for 13 years. We've lived in Mexico. And the differences in the culture are not just a matter of learning another language. It's a matter of learning about what the people experience as reality, because your reality is what you experience. And that is not always the same in every country. It's not even always the same in every community within a country. And so there again we have that science fiction element that you're thrown into a situation you have to come to understand, and you have to come to understand it's not exactly the same as what you grew up with.
There's been a lot of talk among the
evolutionary psychologists.
Fixed and unchanging human nature. I can't accept that. I don't believe it. Like you said, it isn't merely historical. It isn't merely a matter that people have changed over time, which some people would actually deny. But there are all kinds of different ways of being in the world and experiencing the world. People live in different worlds.
I believe that I think their world is different.
So different that it might as well be a different planet.
And their consciousness becomes different because their world is different. And that's a thing we have to extend ourselves quite a bit to come to understand. And of course, as writers, that's what we do.
Well, one of the things that I'm very proud of about Anna as a character, and I think that something happens when you really come to love a character, is the courage with which she chooses between the worlds that she can live in, and that her choices are fundamentally moral choices. She's not entirely happy, as you pointed out, she's not entirely happy with the choice she has to make. The Shakers were flawed people. But the world isn't perfect. And the best we can do is the best we can do. And one thing that we find ourselves fascinated by about the Shakers is that, generally speaking, these were and still are people who do their best.